This is Karen with New Cleveland Radio, and it is time for the Intentionality Gurus. Now, it's interesting. Candace and I, before we start recording, we usually chat about either our weekend or what has happened in the past. And today, she finally said to me, I think I know how we're going to use this topic. And it's right problem, right solution. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was, doing my normal thing, which is, reading blogs and things like Medium and a couple of other groups that I follow. And I came across a couple of articles about problem solving on Medium. And there were two that stood out to me. And so they were kind of the inspiration for the topic today.
Okay.
And one was by Alex Miguel Meyer, Meyer, the 4-step framework to solve almost any problem like a top strategy consultant. And that was a little dense for me. I mean, it had like too many moving parts. I don't have the attention span for those kinds of things so much anymore. And then the other one that kind of solidified it for me was Debbie Widjaja. I have no idea how you pronounce the name, but it's spelled Debbie, and then it's Widjaja. And her article was The Problem Solver's Playbook, 17 Questions to Sharpen Your Thinking. So that led me to doing this topic today to explore when we're faced with a problem at home or work, most of us just jump in to solve it. It's a problem, we have to solve it. But we're going to explore today how asking key questions can define the problem better and refine the proposed solution to greater impact and value to all involved.
Okay.
So you had do you want to use what we discussed briefly this morning or something else?
Oh, no, that's fine. So I mentioned to you that my son is coming home after all these months. And so when I asked him, when are you coming home? He said, he gave me this, description of, well, I'm really done with my work, but I have these things I still have to do. And I said, okay. And then it became one of, well, maybe Friday, maybe Saturday, but no, probably Friday. And if not Friday, then Monday next week. And my first reaction was, oh, how are you going to get from the airport to home? Because after almost a year, wouldn't you expect that your mother or father or both would come pick you up at the airport? But not knowing when he's coming home, what day, what time of day, I came up with a solution that, well, if we can't pick you up, you'll need to take an Uber. So I resolved something, but I'm not even sure that there was a problem there.
Well, and then how were you feeling about that solution?
I wasn't feeling really good about it initially. But I will say the more I think about it, it's a logical solution. And, since he's moved away, it's not that he's not part of our life, but he's not a daily part of our life. And I have to, I think he needs to understand that, which I think he does. And I'm starting to finally understand it, that I just can't always be there on the drop of a dime.
Errand on demand.
Yeah.
All right. And so just pulling from these articles, as well as things from Byron Katie, who wrote, came up with the concept of the work. The first question is, whose problem is it?
Well, initially, I saw it as my problem. Okay. How am I going to get him from the airport to home? But then something clicked in my brain, and it was like, it's not my problem or issue. It's his. And he knows how to do that. So, it's now on his shoulders rather than on mine.
And this reminds me of the conversation we had about, I think it was your brother who had some issues with the flight. Remember that? Okay. And how are those similar or different?
know.
Think.
Well, he's got to make the decision whether when he flies in, how he flies in, time wise, day. That has to be his choice. Therefore, not my choice, not my problem.
But that was not your initial instinct.
No. Initially it was, I'm going to be working. We have plans to go out and all those things. And, I kept thinking, as a lot of parents would, oh, I got to change my plans for him. And then something just clicked and it was like, no, I don't.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with having that instinct. It's just catching yourself in the act of it. Because,
Right.
I certainly have that gene as well, that something's wrong here. It's up to me to do something about it. When I may not have the capacity to do it, I may not have the interest in doing it, or the, other resources and so on. And I may not be the best person for it. So that's the point is, in our personal relationships, I think it's more slippery in terms of, well, he's my son or he's my brother or whatever. But, the call came in, and then that's a little blinking cursor in your brain, no doubt. Like, okay, I've got to work this through, got to work it through, got to work it through. Does that sound valid?
Very valid, because as we were talking about him being home definitely next week, I have a secondary job that I do, and I only do it like once a month. And next week is the week that I will be doing it. And I will be driving all over Northeast Ohio for 3-4 days. Now, it's not that I won't be home, but I won't be working from home. I won't have the flexibility. And in the past, I probably would have jumped on it and said, oh, I'm going to contact them and see if I can change my schedule. But I realized that I'm still going to have plenty of time to spend with him. He has other things he's going to be doing here. In fact, he'll be working from home during the day. So why am I creating an issue that I don't have to? I'm going to go ahead and do my stuff. He'll do his. And when we're done at the end of the day, we can come together then.
Well, and it what stands out for me is it's an opportunity to be more intentional about that time that you do spend together, rather than just occupying the same space.
Exactly.
And what would that look like?
It might mean that we actually all sit down to dinner together. Or if we choose to, whatever we choose to do is going to be deliberate for whatever that time is. Because I know what it's like when we're occupying the same space, day in and day out, but with no direction to it for really coming together. We assume, oh, we're together, even though we're in separate rooms and both working.
Yeah, and it's not the kind of together that you remember necessarily. Right. I know when I would go home for college, I'm from out of state originally. I would go home for college, and, I would just basically hang out, and my parents had, things to do, etc. And I would find my way up from the city. I had to take a limousine service and so on, because there wasn't a nearby airport, those kinds of things. So it was good skill building in terms of my personal problem solving and so on. Not that I had it all together, but I was able to figure things out. And then not to put the burden on my parents. Not that I was consciously thinking of those things, but I could be more self-sufficient and so on. But the big part is, when do we take responsibility for the problem on, and being conscious about that fork in the road? So
Right.
the first question we can ask, I'm not going to go through all of I'm going to call her Debbie's 17 questions, but that she breaks this approach into 3 sections. So the first one is assess whether the problem is worth solving. So what do you think of there?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of times that, something will come up, and because I may see it as a problem, I think that it has to be resolved. But if I step back from it, I may realize that it's just a glitch. It's not really a problem. You don't have to choose to go one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, and when I first read that section, I think, darn, I wish I had read this before.
Yeah.
Because, I'm like you that, okay, I'm, all hands on deck, I'm on this. But it isn't necessarily, when we have a limited time budget, it isn't the best use of my time or my focus or energy. And then the second section of questions is all about finding the problem that matters. So how does that stack up in the context of Alex?
So interesting, because I wasn't expecting this question, but it makes sense. So it's not the problem of getting him from the airport here or for here to the airport, if that were to be the issue, because there are ways, and it doesn't have to, be a problem. The only problem that there might come across, because this is something he discussed with me yesterday, he said, he's going to need to borrow my car on a couple of occasions so that he can meet with some people and do some things. And I said, then we're going to have to sit down and figure out, what my schedule is and what you want your schedule to be, so that we can make those arrangements that you have a car. So whether it's a problem or whether it's just an issue that needs to be resolved, that's something we're going to have to do, but we're going to have to be kind to each other, knowing that we each have obligations and we're going to have to maybe do some compromising.
Yeah, yeah. And the other part of it is, I see this often, that there will be the exception and then there's the rule. So, which is, when we are defining the problem, which ultimately will define the solution, what is an exception to the rule and what is the rule? And I remember I was complaining on a listserv that I belonged to about a particular corporate entity that was difficult to deal with regarding my clients. And somebody in Southern Ohio responded on this listserv, well, I had a case years ago where my client, that type of corporation, got sued because of a reliance on this one particular legal instrument. And I wanted to send him a note saying, dude, that's the exception. That's not the rule. Yeah, any idiot can sue. The question
Right.
is, what happens with it? Is, do you have defenses to it and so on? But here we often get whipsawed by the exceptional circumstance, not exceptional in a good way, but exceptional in a minor or annoying way, that drives everything else out of whack, especially, schedules on limited time. So the last segment that her questions fall into are discovering the best solution. And in another context, the phrase I love is the right size solution. All right. And defining your done criteria. Because I certainly, in my day job, have taken on things where my engagement with the client just, it keeps manifesting. It's like an onion that manifesting with now this obstacle and that obstacle. And I didn't sign up for all of those. And in fact, I don't have the wherewithal or experience to address those things. But the client's expectation is that I've adopted them in essence. So where that might that show up in this context?
Well, if I'm understanding it right, what I foresee is that, he's been telling us, for months, he can't wait to see us and he wants to spend time with us. And I'm sure he does, but I have to sort of understand what my expectations are and what he really means by it. Because I don't think he wants to be with us 24/7 for the 7 to 10 days he's home. And I have to accept the fact that I like my privacy as much as he likes his. And so, he's not one to really discuss those things, but I need to be more mindful rather than put him and myself in a situation where he can't wait to get back to Texas.
Mhm, mhm. Well, and to live a life that a young man is supposed to live.
Right. Exactly.
Not have one foot in Cleveland, hometown, and one foot there. Not that there's
Right.
anything wrong with that, but I think, you know what I mean by that.
When we used to go visit my parents when they lived up in Michigan, we would, like my mother, I'd call and tell my mother, is this a good weekend for us to come up? And she'd say, absolutely. And then we'd get up to Michigan, and next thing I know, well, they were going out that evening. So why don't we join them? And it was like, I don't even know the people you're going out with. Why am I joining you? But those were her expectations that we were coming in to be with them. So we would be with them in any setting. And I remember trying to have a conversation with them and saying, look, if I tell you we're coming in on a weekend and it's not good for you, you need to tell me that, because I don't need just to hang with you with your friends or whatever. You go do that. That's all right. But I don't have to be there as well. And it was very hard for my parents to understand, because they thought, oh, well, of course you're going to go with us. You're our child.
Yeah. And how does that feel?
It was horrible, because I wanted to go up and spend time with them. I wanted, if Rich and I got up there 4 times a year, that was a lot based on our work schedules. And it was like, I might talk to you every week, but this is the chance I have to sit down with you and see how you're doing, and you get to see how I'm doing. And, I don't need all these other people around to be part of this. And they finally picked up on it. It took a number of years for us to keep repeating ourselves. And it finally was, yeah, we really would like to spend some alone time with you too.
Yeah, and I remember my in-laws had that kind of quality when we would visit them in Florida after they retired. And, I was exhausted. I had to knock myself out to carve out a week of visiting. So it was the week I had to work for just prior, the week during I had to get done before I left, and the week after, because I would be so busy catching up that, so I had 3 weeks of work I had to get done before I took a 1 week absence from the office. And I was literally emotionally and physically exhausted. And they often would comment, she sleeps a lot. Well, because I was exhausted.
Right, exactly.
But they had all of these activities lined up, et cetera, et cetera. There was no input from my husband and I. And, he was used to it. He grew up with that kind of parents dictating, what we do and that kind of a thing. And I rebelled. I mean, I was not a very good daughter-in-law when it came to those visits, but I wish I had had some of these insights, because I might have been able to assert myself in a maybe a more effective way.
Makes
So
sense.
some of the other factors to think about besides, whose problem is it, and who's impacted is a question to ask. So in your scenario today, it was mostly just your family, but it might have been other family members or his friends or something like that. The other is from Meyer's article, who is impacted, actually from both of the articles. So who are actually, and it may not be just the actual players, it could be others, particularly if we're talking about a problem at work or something, or, so-called problem, a pseudo problem. And then what are the constraints? So what are the limiting things here? And in other contexts, they call that a forcing function. Like, we have to make this square peg fit into this round hole. All right, now how do we do it? And then, brainstorm the various ways that might happen. And then finally, I already stated it, the done criteria. How do we know we're done? And in the coaching I do, I often see that. And, as I already mentioned, that I often experience it, self-induced pain of, the finish line is always just out of my reach. I had a case years ago where I had an elderly woman who allowed an adult, chronologically adult granddaughter move in with her temporarily until she found another apartment after she broke up with the boyfriend. And then she didn't leave, and she had her friends over, and they were having wild parties, and they kicked her out of her bedroom, and other bad things happened. And then adult protection services were brought in, and they told the elderly lady she had to go into a nursing home when she was totally fine. She was totally cogent. She navigated transportation by the bus system, for
Yeah.
elders, and was able to come and go from my office and so on. And so I originally consulted with her about fighting back adult protection services and their push to have her declared incompetent and so on. There was no evidence to support that. But then eventually I had to evict, her younger underage sister moved in. She was 14. So she's truant from school. I couldn't get any of the, government agencies to get her out of the house. But I eventually evicted. I had to go to court to evict them because they were holdover guests. And it's like, okay, this is not something I should be doing. I know how to evict people, but it's not really what I should be doing. So, the reason I wanted to have this conversation in this particular episode is for us just to notice those forks in the road, and where all of those little micro decisions add up to us getting mired into something that maybe we are not well equipped to handle, and so on. So any more thoughts for you on this?
Well, as far as my situation coming up, I don't see it being that difficult.
Yeah.
The first difficulty that I thought I saw was his transportation back and forth. And then I realized, coming here, when he leaves his house, he's taking an Uber to the airport and an Uber from the airport back to his house when he goes home. So it's like, this is logical for him.
Cleveland, right?
Right. So it's no different. Okay. And I think, especially in my past, I made a lot of issues into problems because as that pleaser person, I felt like I had always come up with solutions. So you're not just going to come up with a solution unless there's an issue there. And so,
and
my
whose issue is
husband
it?
My husband used to say to me all the time, "Why are you creating a problem?" And I would say, "No, I'm just coming up with an answer." He goes, "But you don't have to. That's somebody else's." And I would look at him and go, "Oh, but it was proposed to me." He said, and so that's what this is all about. It's just because it's proposed to you, do you have to be the one who responds? And you don't have to be.
Exactly. We have choice. We have that fork in the road, and between, as Viktor Frankl said in Man's Search for Meaning, between a stimulus and response is a pause, and in that that pause, that space, is where we can determine which response we're going to take. So cool.
I love it. Well, again, thank you on this October 2nd, beginning of October session that we're having. And we will be back in a couple of weeks, and we hope to hear from our listeners. So take care.
Take care, Karen. Thank you.
Bye-bye.